Oh, now it says
Now
is
it's
Now it
live.
says
on
live.
air.
Be live. Okay, I guess we'll start by introducing ourselves then. I'm Greg Jordan.
I'm Celestia Roberts.
My name is Jeremy Preet.
And we'll go on to the first question about attributes of the advocate for Family 460. What threats to children and families did Elder Holland mention? How has Babylon influenced the development of the threat to children and families that you have chosen to address? Answers.
One thing that I noticed was that we needed to not cease good judgment. We still needed to have good judgment, but rather than we need to have righteous judgment rather than self-righteous judgment. And we need to keep fighting for the freedom of religion.
What do you think?
I actually listened to this talk like 6 times this week already, because it's so applicable even to some of the things that are happening in good old Canada right now with the attacks on family. And it's not just something that's far away. It's actually right happening in my own school district where my children are attending school, and some of the parenting rights are being threatened, and some of the rights of the majority of children are being threatened in defense of the minority. But one of the things that really stood out to me about the Babylonian influence, I guess, if you will, is that sometimes I guess we're not hearing the call to action, and if we're hearing it, then sometimes we're quite content to sit back and not address it. And partially because maybe we're sheltered, maybe it's in a different area. However, I think that that influence and the progression of that worldly influence, it's almost beyond the point of being able to sit back. It's not. We probably could sit back, but we have to stand up and we have to advocate for God's laws in spite of what's popular, in spite of what is maybe politically correct. Because now being right and being on God's side is almost across the board politically incorrect.
So what is happening in the school there specifically?
So somehow we ended up, this is kind of a long backstory, but we ended up with 2 you would call right-wing parties, 2 conservative type of parties, and they split the votes of the people. And so what happened was they had 55% of the votes between the 2 parties, and they ended up splitting those, and so the left-wing party actually won, which is a very extreme liberal party, and with a minority vote they won. And so they've introduced very radical policies. The new policy that they're implementing is it sounds very well and good because it's they use the word respect a lot. They use a lot of anti-bullying type terms, but they took down the signs for the male and female bathrooms this week in the schools. So all bathrooms are now gender neutral, and this is from preschool. My 4-year-old daughter now shares a bathroom, and it's not. There's no limitations on, like, if I'm a visitor, a guest to the school, I do not have to use any other bathroom. So we can have grown men at sporting events, school basketball games, going into the little girl's bathroom, and that goes the same with change rooms, and that goes the same with the shower rooms. They're all now gender neutral. Couple other alarming points. There's a lot of points that I don't like, but another one that's quite alarming is that the new bill now prevents the information dissemination as far as gender control from coming back to the parents, and they changed the term from mom and dad and mother and father to just caregiver across the board. So there'll be no more identification of mother and father. It's just caregiver. And what was the third thing that I didn't like? There's a bunch. I'll think of it, but yeah, that's kind of the big uproarious thing that's happening this week in little old Alberta.
Wow,
That's so scary.
that's
I,
amazing.
yeah.
So this advocacy thing is on my mind, and it has nothing to do with this class. Although some of the information that I'm getting from this class is going straight to social media because I'm trying to, perpetuate some of the correct beliefs and terminology back into the public eye as much as I'm able to.
Yeah, one thing that I've been realizing from this class and then also from Elder Holland's talk is that we just can't passively advocate for our own families by just doing what's right. We have to be actively engaged, and specifically in your example, you have to fight for what you know is right, and we have to fight for the family within society rather than just within our families. And so that's something that's really been touching me lately, is that I need to be doing more. And so, but that can be a scary thought. Well, how am I supposed to start this big foundation? But even just small things like posting on social media and posting my beliefs and my testimony is a step in the right direction. So that's something that I've been on my mind a lot lately, is that we need to be more active in our role rather than passively watching things.
I think the liberals are very good at labeling people, and nobody wants to be labeled. And so that's why they silence us.
Oh, I just remembered the other thing. So the other thing that drives me nuts, I'm a football coach, and the one thing that they've done with this bill as well is to dissolve gender-specific sports teams. So they say that if a male identifies as a female and wishes and so chooses, he can now play on the female athletic teams. He can play on the basketball team or whatever. And so there's a lot of confusion on how that's going to go, because if there's 10 athletic males that say they identify as females, then you would have essentially an all-boys and all-male female basketball team. And so some of us in the coaching world are a little bit concerned about the fallout on how that's how that's going to look moving forward.
Wow.
Yeah, that takes over the opportunity for the girls to play, because of course men are going to be stronger and faster, so they're going to get a spot over a woman.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's funky.
That's interesting. I had heard about these things, but I've never seen it so close. I can't imagine.
Yeah, not in my backyard, and I think that's one of the things Elder Holland says. This call is not it's not just happening like today. It's been happening through the ages, and sometimes we put our moral compass or our moral cell phone on vibrate. Like we know he's calling, but we don't do anything about it. We just kind of ignore the call. And I'll get back to you later, Jesus. I know you're calling, but I'm kind of busy right now with my life, and well. It's a scary world we're living in, and principles of truth need advocacy more than ever before, in my opinion.
So were there any threats that Elder Holland specifically mentioned? I know he said threats to children. I know he mentioned poverty, ignorance, transgression, but he didn't specify, did he, or did he? Because it asked that in the question.
Well, I think one of the things, it was also some great illustrations he used for his points. I thought the basketball one was kind of telling, because there's a lot of dynamic to that goes to kids. I guarantee you, and I wasn't at the basketball game that he was talking about, that he was referring to, but that there was kids watching, and so that kind of mentality of a pack mentality and of bullying from adults to other adults, and it happens online, especially when anonymity is concerned. But I thought that that's a major threat just in the training itself, when people are willing to check their religion at the door, so to speak. It definitely has a trickle-down effect. Not even a trickle-down effect. It's a waterfall, because this is how our kids are learning to interact in society, and so they learn by sitting next to Dad, who's booing and yelling obscenities, that's appropriate. And I think that's a massive threat because that's a cycle that continues and starts earlier and earlier as children observe it.
So I think of, say you check your religion at this door, but do you pick it back up on your way out? That's, I think, referring to your cycle. Are you going to pick it back up on your way out, or are you going to keep it in the back seat throughout the rest of your life and your activities and things?
I don't think they check it at the gymnasium door. I think they check it at the church door as they're leaving.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that check in and check out at the church door, I think.
Sunday members.
Yeah. It says, how does Elder Holland's description of Babylon and Israel coincide with defending the doctrine of the family in these latter days? Babylon, of course, is the world, and Israel are the members of the church.
I think that the two used to coincide a little more peaceably, at least in my world. Surely there was some challenges, but as we were mentioning earlier, these problems are coming closer and closer and closer. My home is now almost like an oasis, where I thought my country was an oasis, and so they just can't, they just don't coexist anymore. They've gone further and further apart, and so now the principles of the world are so different than the principles of the Lord, where they used to be so close before. But you know, it's a slippery slope, and it's getting steeper from the Pledge of Allegiance and the flag and taking God out of the national anthem and out of the classrooms to now we're doing and talking about what we're talking about. I think the need, like I said, for advocacy is it's so critical. We're really at a tipping point now where you can see this battle over free rights and complacency. You know, I like to put up Christmas lights, and I can just see this influx of Muslims into my neighborhood. Well, I just think that at some point I'm going to have to defend the right to even put up Christmas lights because I know it's going to offend somebody. And so some of these things, maybe they're small battles, and some of them might not seem worth fighting, but the big picture is so dreary. It's so bleak. If you're not willing to fight for the little things, then the big things, it's almost inconsequential.
I like that you point out that your home is an oasis. I think that's important, where the world is obviously not an oasis anymore, that we make our homes as close to the temple as possible, and and that our homes should be the next best thing to the temple. So I like that you point that out, that that's something that we can still strive for, even though the world is not what it should be.
And that's done by almost continual preemptive strikes against what the world is trying to do. And this whole thing with we call it Bill 10 right now, this NDP thing. We learned about it the very next day. We sat down with our children to discuss it, and my daughter, who's in 8th grade, had already had a social studies class on it at school, and it had already been addressed and talking about transgender phobia, transgender, whatever all these terms are. So that's 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, and it already had this entire discussion for 1 hour about gender confusion and transgender and pre-op and all this stuff. They're teaching that little girls can have penises and little boys can have vaginas, and so my little girls are getting this. And so if you're going to be able to have this this oasis where your home is still safe, it has to be throw your TV out the bloody door, and you're going to have to sit down and be very, very active, because this is a non-rest, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week thing. It's coming at us full force, just wave after wave after wave coming. So when he says Babylon the Great is falling, I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I really don't see it. It's a great song, but Babylon is coming full force. And if we're willing to be complacent still, like my dad was and like his dad was, and just be those Sunday type of religionists, failure is inevitable. It really is.
Amen.
Gary. Gary. My parents, where he reads about all this kind of stuff on the internet and everything, and he talks about it, he would talk about it, and I say, no way, there's no way something like that could happen. And then you're saying it is happening. That's
yeah. Well, it just seems like the other day that my grandma was writing letters, and she's been dead for 10 years, but it just seems like the other day that she was writing letters about allowing gay marriage. Now it's almost universal, and it's very widely accepted, gay marriage. My kids have seen gays, in public holding hands and all that kind of stuff. Well, now since they've given that definition that gays, have the equal rights, and well, now you can go online, and I'm not even lying to you about this. Pedophilia is being legally sought as an organized and recognized sexual orientation. And so watch what happens. Watch what happens when that comes through, because how can you discriminate against these poor pedophilia? They have this tendency, and they have these thoughts and emotions and feelings that are very active. They can clinically prove that they have this disorder. Well, then it has to be recognized. This is what the world is telling us. And so, where does it end? I don't know. Where does it end?
It doesn't.
I don't know.
That's just disgusting.
I'm not trying to hijack the discussion, but you know what? We're talking about advocacy, so these are the things that are. I mean, we're facing them. I didn't think I'd be having to have some of these conversations with my kids ever, and now I'm having them with my little kids. So.
No, I'm glad that you're sharing all this, because it opens my eyes to how prevalent that it really is. I'm from a small town in southern Utah. My high school, my graduating class had less than 300 people, and so this just blows my mind. And so it's really eye-opening to see all these things and how much of a threat that they really are, and how important it is that we do stand up. So don't feel bad for taking over. It's informing to me.
Let me just put it in perspective, since you said small town, less than 300 in your graduating class. Cardston, Alberta, you've heard of it. It's the first temple outside of the United States, right? It looks just like the Mesa Temple and Laie Hawaii Temple. Anyways, you've seen it before. There's 3,500 people in my town, okay? The biggest employer in the town is the school. So we have, in 3,500 people, we have 2 stakes. We have 15 wards, and I think there is 8 missionaries, whatever. Anyways, I'm just saying there's probably 80 to 90% membership, LDS membership in the community. This community already accepted this bill. They're not fighting it as far as the school division goes. They're already putting in the best practice policies, and so this little bubble that has always been safe, 3,500 people since Brigham Young sent them here, it hasn't hardly grown at all in 100 years. It's just LDS Central. It's almost like the best town in Utah, the small town. It's just transplanted into Alberta. That's what we're under in this small town. It's already accepted. It's already here.
Wow.
That blows me away. I'm in ultra-liberal Southern California, and it still blows me away.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. This week has been worse than last week, but this week is bad.
Wow. I forgot what I was gonna say. It blows me away. So then how does that relate to what Elder Holland said? He talked about how in the olden days when if you were in a situation like that, you would just run away. But now we have to stand and fight. So how do we fight?
I think by what you're doing, Jeremy, is just by, first of all, protecting your little family and explaining to them and talking to them and letting them know that this is what we believe and this is what's right. And so I think by protecting your little family and then having them, when in the other discussion board, I was talking to some of my group members about how when I was watching the broadcast from Brother Rarick, that the whole time I was just thinking, I want to share this broadcast with my family, and that I want to be able to get this team, an army for the Lord's team, for the Lord's side, and be able to share it with my family. And the more that I share it with other people, the more that they share it with other people. So I think it starts by just sharing with one or two people and then building up from there.
Can all the members rise up and protest?
We need to.
Sounds like you're the majority from what you were saying. It seems like the majority could... The minority always has the biggest voice, and the majority always is scared.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's kind of that call that he's talking about. So I think one of the big things is that putting things in perspective. This bill says that essentially if a school district opposes the bill and refuses to do these best practice policies and implement them by March 31st, that their board will be disbanded and reestablished through the NDP government, which is the new Democratic Party. This has already happened. There was at the town capital, or the provincial capital. Sorry, phones are going off and buzzing all over the place here. They already wrote a legal protest and sought legal action. They were disbanded the next day, and a new school board was implemented. And so what's happened is that a lot of these boards, including the school district that we belong to, they're passing it. And I feel that because they are worried about their careers and their jobs, rightly so, I guess, they are going to try their best to skirt around it, make everybody happy, seem like they're following it, and in reality following it, and like the slippery slope analogy just keeps on happening. So when I say sorry, I'm getting a dry mouth here. Perspective, it's you know, you kind of almost have to ask the who, what, when, where, why, and the answer, when you find out that the answer comes back to God and to the principles of the Savior's Church, it'll change a lot of the ways that you behave. Maybe your career is not such a big deal. You know, the Lord said to Lehi and his family, pack your bags and get the heck out. Lehi lost his job, lost his home, lost his riches and stuff like that, but he knew the answer to the who, what, when, where, why was because the Lord and his policies and principles trumps what the world can do and what the world is proposing. So Babylon looked great. I mean, Jerusalem looked great, but the Babylonians still came in and wiped them out. And so when he was willing to follow whatever the instruction was, as hard as it was, and to stand up for that, to go out into the streets and proclaim it, it turned out pretty good for him. He got a better place in the end.
So is this countrywide, or is it county, or what is it?
So we have provinces. Provinces are just like states.
It's the whole province, the state.
Yep, so it's like a statewide. However, keep in mind that our more liberal provinces are the eastern provinces. Ontario has had this implemented several years ago, this gender neutrality kind of thing, and it's easy to find when you access it, the lawsuits, and they're trying to actually expunge that kind of legal mentality from the records and get it out of Ontario now because of the extreme cases of voyeurism that's happening in their schools. And this is from kindergarten up to college, and actually in public restrooms as well, the gender neutral thing. And so they're, yeah, just the voyeurism is causing mass chaos over there. It's on kind of a quiet scale, but actually easy to research and find.
So are they doing this all over Europe?
I don't know what Europe's like. I imagine Europe's pretty
ultra liberal.
Ultra liberal, yeah. I would imagine. I haven't researched other places outside Canada, but for sure, yeah, Ontario. They've had some media coverage on the negative aspects of it, and not just because of this, but people are digging it up now to find out what's in store for our kids.
It seems scary because I don't know. You put. Seems scary. Seems like some little girl's gonna end up getting raped in a bathroom by little boys or big boys or.
Hey, do you know what? Like, this is going to sound condemning and like totally damning for me, but when I was 16, I was super interested in girls. Like, I would have been, oh, sign me up. Yep, I relate to the girls, and I'm going to go in the girls' locker room. And I'm not just a wacko 16-year-old, but the hormones are raging. I understand how it is. Oh, you give me an option, I'm going to go and shower with the girls or shower with the boys. Who do you think I'm going to pick? I'm a red-blooded, whatever, you know. Anyways, there's just nothing but problems here. However, the bathrooms and the showers, to me, isn't the issue. That's the scary part of it, but it's not the only scary part, because it's all about rights and what's coming. You know, what's after this? I can't pray. I'm going to be thrown into a lion's den. You know, it happens. I mean, it's not. I'm not just imagining it. This is Daniel, and somebody waits at his window, and as soon as he prays, guess what?
Crazy. So, what characteristics and attributes did Elder Holland expound on that will make us more effective family advocates? Well, he talked about how in the olden times, what I said earlier, that the church members would just flee an area when there were issues, but now we have to stand and fight. So we have to be advocates for what is right and holy and gospel principles and everything like that. And he also said we need to stand as witnesses of God in all places, at all times, and don't check our religion at the door. We have to be members at all times and act like it. But he also said that we need to be loving and caring. So when we're talking to others that would disagree with us, we have to be loving and understanding and caring and try to share with them in a way that will help them and not just create anger or whatever.
The reason why that is so difficult is because the people that are opposed to these things, the people who are showing tolerance towards these changes, and I know we're talking about some neglect, and I'm not mentioning those necessarily, but it's the neighbors, it's people in your ward, it's your family members saying, yeah, but you know what? Why can't we just love people who are transgender, and they deserve rights too? And the world is so skewed and twisted on we'll cater to the one, but we'll punish the 99. We'll strip the rights away from the 99 to give this one poor child all the rights, all the power, and that completely erodes the system. It completely erodes the rest of society and the principles that govern how we behave, how we act, and how we believe.
Yeah, that's something that always bothered me. These minorities cry out and say they're being judged and mistreated. Well, I think that they're judging and mistreating to the opposite end, to where, like you said, the majority are being punished, and it just gets old. And going back to what some characteristic attributes Elder Holland mentioned, one thing that stood out to me, and it was also said in Brother Rarick's broadcast, is that we do not dumb down our religion. You know, we don't do that, and we shouldn't do that, and we can't do that, and we need to stand up for what we believe in and not let things slip or let things slide by, or, you know, like people, like you said, people, your ward members are saying, well, why not just love everyone? Well, like I mentioned earlier, we need to still have righteous judgment.
So back to the original Elder Holland talk. I keep sidetracking a little bit here, but that question, the characteristics and attributes, and I thought of that one story he talked about where the police officer had that situation with the family. You know what I'm talking about? So I thought, well, characteristic, that would be pretty easy to stand up when there's all these people in here that are high on drugs and stuff like that. It would be really easy to stand up if I had a gun. I might be a little bit, trepidatious in a situation like that, lots of high people, and if I just walked in there unarmed. But then I was reading my scripture, and I found this scripture that said, in talking about receiving our endowments in the new Kirtland Temple, and Joseph Smith said, actually I think it was the dedicatory prayer, to be honest, but and they shall go forth from this house armed with power. I thought that's critical. Like, we have to arm ourselves, and one of those attributes and characteristics is that we are armed. And of course I'm talking about power from keeping covenants and making covenants and the power of the Spirit, but armed also with the knowledge that we're getting in classes like this. These tools, they're resources, and so in just skimming them and in just trying to check the boxes and get through every week, we're really doing ourselves a disservice if we're going to be effective advocates. So arm yourself by preparing and studying and being ready so that you know what to do when those situations are staring you in the face.
Absolutely. Is there anything else? So do we all agree on everything so far? We're all saying all different things, but it says in the thing that we're supposed to try to come to an agreement on our answers, or expound on what the differences in our answers were. Something along those lines, whatever it says.
You guys are smart people. I agree with what you're saying, and I think we agree pretty clearly that there's a definitive need for action. I think that's the underlying message here from Elder Holland, is that sitting back and killing time doesn't work no more. The world is, it's changed. The whole game has changed.
Absolutely. According to what you have learned from Elder Holland's talk, what obligation, if any, do you have in a scenario like the one in the video? The video, I assume, with the guy, what is it, 2020 or whatever?
What would you do? What would you do?
What was that show that it came from?
That's what it's called. What would you do?
Yeah. But I'm saying, what was that guy from? He's from 2020, or was it something else?
I don't know.
I've seen him before, but I don't know on what.
I hope you feel better.
So what would you guys do?
Until I'm sick. I'm sorry.
I tell you what I would do. I would keep my mouth shut and mind my own business. But that's not
what I thought.
really
That was
what
my
we
first
should
reaction too.
Israel, Israel, God is calling. So what would you really do? Is that what you really do? Because now we have a disagreement if that's what you would really do.
No, that was my first reaction, like, oh, this is awkward. I'll just pretend like I'm not hearing. But actually, there's this kind of a similar situation that's going on in my family right now. Sorry, babe. My husband's sitting right next to me.
Huh?
Put your earphone back in. You need to listen.
What?
My sister-in-law, my husband's sister, is coming out saying that she's supposedly gay, but honestly, we don't really think that she is, and so that's kind of like really close that what was going on in that video right now, and what we've kind of come to the conclusion, what we need to do as a family is what the advice was given from those people, is that we need to love and support them no matter what. We can't ostracize them. We can't shun her from our family because she thinks that she's gay. Regardless of if she is or isn't, we still need to love her no matter what. And then something in Elder Holland's talk he says, which is hard to do sometimes, is distinguish between the sin and the sinner. She's our sister. We still love her. She's still a good person. But it doesn't mean that we have to accept her ways and her decisions, but we still need to accept her and love her and still be welcoming of her into our family and let her know that our love is not going to leave her.
I think you just perfectly answered the last question about the attributes and what you would basically be if you were a customer there. I'll just finish that last one according to Elder Holland's talk. What obligation? The answer is a massive obligation. Where much is given, much is required. We are so accountable because we understand the eternal nature of families. We understand that if we are to alienate, that there is zero chance of help. If we are to passively sit by and enjoy that plate of fries that didn't look that delicious to begin with, guess what? The world's going to go on, but it's not going on the direction that it should be. We are accountable for those who we would have helped had we opened up. And that's a true principle. So the obligation there, in answer to that question, the obligation is massive. We are obligated to open our mouths and advocate for family, to advocate for those things that you were just saying. Peace, love, and joy. I mean, let God sort them out, but we have to put ourselves in a position to help them regardless of what they're doing and where they're at.
Yeah, and I like the advice that that first couple, the older couple, gave, is that there's programs for situations like this, and that I was glad that they pointed that out rather than just saying, oh, well, sorry, you know.
Armed. That's the armed I'm talking about, right? That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But to the TV show, I bet you that was a bad answer. We were like saying, yeah, that's the right answer. But I'm sure to the guy, it was like, those people are crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
But because that lady was aware of the program, then in her answering that question, what obligation does she have? Well, she has the obligation to share it. Like,
Yeah.
Babylon the Great is not going to fall, and it's not going to change if you're not armed and if you're not willing to pull a trigger on something like that when you have the chance.
Yeah, something that Brother Rarick said in his broadcast is way to start advocating is just simply by being educated. Did I say advocating? You need to be educated, and watching the news and, you know, knowing of all the issues and knowing of sources and resources that you can go to. And so I think for me personally, that's where I want to start, is being educated on things, so when something comes up, I can stand up and properly stand up for what I believe in and what is right.
Good answer. What's the summary of that question? Hate the sin but love the sinner and stand strong.
Excellent. All right, are we on to the summary part of it? Are we doing that? Oh, sorry.
If you were a customer at this restaurant and observed this father-son exchange, what principles or attributes did Elder Holland teach that should guide your response?
Oh, maybe that was hate the sin, love the sinner.
Probably we're answering
both in one.
Both in one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good governing practice is that WWJD. I know it's not necessarily originated from our church, but if you can act as the Savior acts in that situation, how would he act? Would he be homophobic right there? Would he condemn the father and tell him he's doing a sucky job loving his kid? Like, I just don't think so. I think that those customers that they showed, there's probably some others, but those customers that they showed, they really employed some great attributes that the Savior would say. He would teach correct principles right there.
I liked what Elder Holland said about, well, he talked about judging and that we're always fearful. We can't judge, but the truth is we do judge and we can judge. The thing is we can't condemn.
Yeah.
He said we should never condemn others, but we do judge people's actions. We do try to protect our children from these things and all the things he said along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's where the world is getting confused between judgment and condemning someone. You know, everyone has to make judgments, whether should I go into this dark, scary alley. I'm going to make a judgment call, you know, but I'm not condemning the people that are there, right? And so I think that's where the world gets confused, is between judgment and condemnation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is the last question. Do you want to make a summary, Jeremy, of everything?
I could make a summary. I could make a summary statement if I'm elected to do so. My summary statement would be basically that exciting news, and don't take it as bad news because it's exciting news, but whom the Lord calls, the Lord qualifies. And each one of us, and I think I'm already started, and you probably are too. I'm talking about your sister-in-law, but because Israel, God is calling, and because we're learning what we're learning, and we're at the stage of the world's history that we're at, each one of us is going to be given profound, meaningful, and significant opportunities to be advocates, not only for family, but for marriage, for God, for principles that govern freedom. And we're going to be given those opportunities to either sit by passively and observe, or to stand up and make a difference. I loved Elder Holland's plea that he would be found doing something good, that the Savior would come and he would be found actively advocating and serving and loving. The Lord does truly shape the back to fit the burden, and attributes of advocates are sometimes very identifiable, but also very specific. The experiences that we've been given will be specific to the trials that are going to go before us. So I would consider that as a call to arms. If we're not advocating now, consider the fact that that song is 100 years old. Israel, Israel, God is calling us to stand up and to be an active voice for His truth.
Does one or all of us could give a summary statement? Do you have a summary statement, Celestia? Did I say your name right?
Yeah, it's like the celestial kingdom without the L. I think Jeremy hit the nail on the head. Just, we need to be active. Can't sit back and relax anymore. Got to stand up.
I think I agree 100%. I don't mean to say because when you say but, it disregards everything that was said previously. And, not but, and I would add that we have to do it, just like Elder Holland said, always in a loving way, which I think is in, the second biggest population of gays or whatever is in Salt Lake, because I think the members are loving and caring. Even though we don't accept what they're doing, we still love the sinner but don't love the sin, hate the sin or whatever. So I think for the most part we are a good example, but we need to do better at advocating along with the loving.
Awesome.
Yep.
Stop broadcast now, guys.
Sounds
Yep.
good to me.
Great discussion.